We heard from Cenk Uygur what we've been hearing from people on the anti-Israel side for a while, which is this idea that Israel wants to resettle Gaza. That's a great idea, and I fully support that. Unfortunately, that is not Israel's official policy. But what would it mean if it was? And what did previous policies of settling Gaza and the West Bank mean for Israel, for Israeli security? And what does the opposite, which we've experienced in Gaza for the last 20 years, what does that mean? Uh, Today we're going to discuss that. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Daniel, your thoughts on this idea of Israel resettling Gaza? Should it happen? And what does it mean that when people tell us that it's about to happen and everything is basically moving in that direction?
So, just quick history. So basically, Gaza used to be controlled by Egypt before 67. Then you had the Six-Day War. Israel, I think rightfully so, took over Gaza, the West Bank, and Golan Heights. When I say rightfully so, I mean for security reasons and for the fact that those nations tried to already once before, but now they've tried to again to eradicate Israel. I think it's a proper way to basically deal with the situation like that. Similar to after World War II, you had an occupation of all major powers, and you decide what is the best sort of solution afterwards. So after that, Israel decided to disengage from Gaza because of unrest coming from Palestinians. And so now we're back here. So when people talk about how we are sort of like heading that way, so you have, the sort of people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. I mean, I think they've been arguing for it the whole time. It's not like something special. They've been arguing for resettling Gaza all this time. So when it comes to sort of like popular support, it's still pretty low. So Israel is a democratic nation. So when you don't have a popular support for something, it's generally really hard to do. Similar to when Israel originally disengaged from Gaza, that was, while not insanely popular, that was like a relatively popular thing to do. So now, uh, something I've been thinking about, what would be although we might do you want me to say what I think would be the most proper way to sort of deal with it, or do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, let me jump in and just say that first of all, thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Yeah, so it's not, Israel's a democracy, but it's not that you need a majority to vote on every policy. And when Israel left the Gaza Strip and forced its citizens out of there, that wasn't voted on by anybody except the parliament and the members of the Likud party, because then Prime Minister and leader of Likud, Ariel Sharon, said we're going to have a referendum of party members, and what they decide is going to be the final decision. He didn't know when he said that they're going to decide they're going to vote against him, so he went ahead and did it anyway. So yeah, that's not much of an issue, and in a sense, what is popular changes quite frequently. Unfortunately, so do the opinions of politicians. So Netanyahu was very much against the disengagement plan to force Israelis out of Gaza, gave good reasons why it's a bad idea, and then voted for it because Sharon said he would fire any minister who votes against him and against the government. Then Netanyahu voted for it, then stayed in government, then resigned when it was about to happen, and now is against resettling Gaza. And I've asked this question before on the show. What in the past 20 years that we've seen the Gaza Strip with no Israeli civilian and military presence, what in Netanyahu's mind has changed? What has proven to him that this was the right way to go and that we should stick to that policy? Because the way I see it, it's very much the opposite, which I think makes it clear where I stand on this. But yeah, what were you thinking should happen?
So, as I've said, once a nation or a government decides to wage a war against you, the nation that wins pretty much has well, sort of like normatively. It just gets to do with it what it wants by the virtue of it is now occupying it. When it comes to the sort of most proper solution, because what you will most likely see from people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich is, of course, some sort of like government. Let's encourage people to move there, which I think is an improper way. But I think at the very least, you get rid of Hamas, you completely get rid of them, and then you actually need to figure out like what can we do here about solving that, like making sure Palestinians don't want to spend their lives just killing us. So I think definitely military control has to be reestablished. If if there was some, I think months ago someone was suggesting, and I don't know how serious it was, but basically for Gaza to become part of the United Arab Emirates or something like that, basically just become like a distant enclave. So if there was like a civilian administration somewhere that in the region that's like friendly towards Israel, I could see that possibility. But we've seen that because it was given to the Palestinian Authority last time, and we've seen what happened then. So that cannot be done. So I think the only solution really is for Israel to retake it and do basically the similar thing that they did after the War of Independence with Arabs. They will, because they were enemies of us, they will live under military occupation or under basically military law for a relatively long time. Depends. It might be a few decades, it might be a few years. And hopefully the next generation won't be radicalized, which I think a good step that was taken towards that is banning UNRWA, because UNRWA, the fact that UNRWA has existed from, I believe, 67. So even when Israel was controlling Gaza, UNRWA was still in charge of the education, which is just we've seen what UNRWA does with children. They educate them to basically hate Jews. So do that, and sort of similar to what happened with Arabs in Israel proper, or similar thing to what happened with the people in Golan Heights. After some time, they get citizenship, and it will still be a problem. Even when it comes to Arabs in Israel, it's not just there are still some problems there, but it's miles difference when you compare Arabs living in Israel and Arabs living in the Gaza or the West Bank regions controlled by the Palestinian Authority.
All right, I agree with some of that, but not fully. I definitely think Israel, of course, should resettle Gaza and be in full control of the Gaza Strip permanently, and make it clear that this is a permanent thing. It's not just a couple of years for security purposes, because security purposes in Gaza are pretty much permanent, or security concerns are pretty much permanent, which is also why I wouldn't annex it right now. I would basically have it as a military controlled zone, and of course have civilian enclaves for Israelis who want to live there. But I also think deporting many of the people there is a necessary part of any real sustainable peace. One thing, I don't remember if I sent this to you or if we may have even done an episode about it, or at least I thought about it, but this idea that a private security company where everybody is ex-CIA would run. Did I send you that? There was some article about it a couple of days. I think maybe I didn't send it to you because it was a video article in Hebrew. When I send you written articles in Hebrew, they're easier to translate. But anyway, I didn't like that idea either, because that idea was they'll have a pilot where they control one neighborhood, and if it works, they'll expand it elsewhere. I think that's a bad idea. First of all, because when Israel has to do something somewhere in Gaza and the CIA is in the way, that does not sound like it sounds like a recipe for disaster. And because Israel does, this is Israel's security, and Israel needs to be in charge of it.
I mean, I could see it if it was like some sort of like a subcontractor of the IDF, or basically it would be, sort of like hiring a private military company for something. But when it comes, especially, like law and order, or basically ensuring that people don't kill each other on streets, or people don't try to kill you, is one of the things that really government has a responsibility to do. When it comes to specifically outsourcing that to like sort of like security agency, I could be persuaded both ways. Again, then the sort of thing is like, is it effective and is it doing what it's supposed to be? Like, does it actually do its job when it comes to ensuring the individual rights are not harmed? I could see it, but Israel already has really bad PR. Hiring ex-CIA people to do its security is, yeah, we won't really dodge the uh,
Yeah.
allegations after that.
And something else you brought up was banning UNRWA, which of course I agree. I think banning UNRWA designated it a terrorist organization, and that's not enough. What you need to make sure is that nobody who's involved in UNRWA is involved in some sort of basically the second iteration of UNRWA under a different name and a different banner. Yeah, nobody who was involved in this in any way can be involved in anything that happens in the Middle East. The UN cannot be involved in any way in anything that happens in the Middle East. And this is a big part of my criticism of Israel when they talk in Lebanon about Security Council resolutions. What are you doing? Like, if you talk about, we need Hezbollah to move back 29 kilometers because that's Security Council resolution 1701. The other side can say, okay, well, here's Security Council resolution saying that Israel needs to leave Gaza, needs to leave the West Bank, needs to leave the Golan Heights. That's not a game Israel wants to play. Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, welcome back, Razi. Thank you. Yeah, I am after a jet lag, so if I say anything that doesn't make sense, blame it on that. And if anybody thinks that the things I usually say don't make sense, jet lag is, once in a while. Probably me after jet lag is still better than most of our trolls when they're not flying out of their mother's basement. Thank you, PC, for another super chat. PC says Palestinian society has problems. Well, Palestinian society is the problem. I mean, the society and the culture, it's not like, okay, here's some things we need. Western society has problems that can be fixed. I think Palestinian society needs to be essentially abolished, and the cultural change that's required there is a completely different culture. It's not like you would keep some things and change some others. Thank you, Stefan, for the super chat. Thank you, Christian, for the super chat. Christian says, I agree with the idea of being in the Gaza Strip, but I'm not sure about resettling. Maybe that will cause more security costs that are than bringing benefits to Israel. Thoughts? There will be
Well,
security
can
costs.
can I quickly
Sure.
like when it comes to a nation, is it like a nation is not like a profit venturing like capital or like a firm. A nation is supposed to ensure protecting of individual rights, and I'm not sure how you could even like quantify that when it comes to like if you're making profit or not. So no, the thing is Israel needs to ensure the security of its citizens, and there is no other choice. There is no like it costs too much. If it you could say it costs too much with something like the Iron Dome, but then the problem is that is because Israel is not actually dealing with the actual issue. It's just trying to sort of like defend itself when it comes to that.
Yeah, and in terms of the security, I mean, there would certainly be security costs. Certainly, if most of the Palestinians are still there, there would be security costs. I don't think that should be the case. But uh, yeah, the security costs were there before, and they were much of the reason for leaving in the first place. And leaving sent a message, which is if we, the Palestinians, inflict losses on Israel, inflict security costs on Israel, Israel will retreat. So I think this sends a very different message, and yeah, basically saying, look, we're here to stay, and any threats, any security threats will be dealt with in a way that they haven't been dealt with in the past. That I think is the right thing to do. Yeah, and look, Israel spends too much money on things that don't government doesn't need to do, as do all governments. So if they need that money, they can privatize education, healthcare, and so on. Actually, if you have anything to say about that, go ahead. There were a few other
Well,
comments.
I'll take something I've learned from Dave Smith because apparently like a vast majority of Israeli land is owned by the government itself. So maybe Israel can finally start actually selling the land that they own, and we'll have money for the security. You're muted.
That's what happens when I'm gone for a short while. I forget how to unmute. Thank you, Alex, for the super chat. I can't see, but is this our Alex who will be on the reality show? So Alex says settlements are massive strategic equities. Having one settlement on a hill would have saved Israel millions in counter-terror operations in Jenin. They aren't a security risk. Yeah, and Alex also sent us something that I was going to address, but let me find it unless you have it handy.
Before you go into that, I can make one more of my points. Something that we've especially heard even from Cheng yesterday, and also what's his name? I can't remember. But someone who has a Palestinian wife, a comedian. He's been on Piers Morgan again. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Bassem Youssef?
Yeah, yeah. So he's been on Piers Morgan and he's been making the claim like, oh, Israel has been occupying Gaza this whole time. They haven't pulled out. And whenever I thought of that argument, it always reminded me of something. And I just remembered or just realized what it reminds me. It reminds me of the same people who argue things like what China used to be or what Soviet Union wasn't a real communism. You can judge basically even and yeah, Israel technically you could say it was like sort of like occupying it. Still it was controlling well, I just controlling its own border is not a, but there were still some security measures that Israel took. But it's like, okay, what do they do with that? What do they do with a little bit of autonomy? And the fact that you give them autonomy and they become more radical, they start attacking you more. What does it like really say about you? It's like, unless they get a full state with a full, when they can actually make a full army, when they can fully arm themselves, until we get there, then yeah, it's still like an occupation and they have a right to resist. No, when they get more autonomy, if they use it to basically try to fight against you more, then that's what they've decided to do, and you have to act accordingly. Did you find it?
Yeah. So Alex sent us before the show. She knew the topic. She sent us basically about Homish, a settlement that was evacuated in 2005 as part of the disagreement, the disengagement. The disengagement was mostly Gaza, but there were four settlements in Samaria and the northern West Bank that were evicted. And as Alex says, these are the most this is the most lawless area. This is the Jenin area, the place where the most radicalized among the Palestinians are. And yeah, she goes on to say no settlers means no IDF. Um, and yeah, that I think that is very much a problem. Christian, thank you for another super chat. Christian says, let me rephrase it. I agree money is not everything, but does it make sense to put civilians inside a hostile society? I guess I need to read more about a counter view to Dan Shueftan. I don't know him, but I will look him up. But no, it doesn't make sense to put civilians inside a hostile society. So first of all, I would not force or encourage anybody to move there. I think there are many who would do so willingly, and I probably have a lot of disagreements with most of them. And yeah, as a hostile society, look, Gaza can't be what it is now when Israel resettles it. It needs to be the security concerns need to be addressed in advance, and then once it's done, any additional security concerns need to be addressed again in a way that they have never been addressed in the past. You have terrorists coming out of a village, out of a neighborhood. That neighborhood pays because they will be responsible for what is being done in their name. Any thoughts about that before I go? There were some comments here that I wanted to comment on.
Well, I think you pretty much, yeah, definitely no like encouragement of someone going that. That was basically what I was saying at the start. I think military bases or some sort of like security apparatus has to be established there, and if some people want to move there, then they can, and they should get the full protection of their rights as any other Israeli citizen. If this occupation actually happens, which I don't think it's likely. If it happens and some Israeli wants to move into somewhere within Gaza, then yeah, he deserves all the protection he can get or he should get all the protection as any, and all the other Palestinians too. You need to reestablish law and order, basically.
Thank you, PC, for the super chat. PC says, why would any Jewish family want to live in Judea, Samaria? It's dangerous. I agree. Alex replied to that saying cheap apartments, higher standard of living, and it's safe. I don't know about the last part. I mean, it's you're not fully safe anywhere in Israel. But yeah, I
I think it could be considered safer because some sort of resistance might be expected, so they are more prepared for anything. While people on the Gaza, on the border of Gaza in the kibbutzim, were not as prepared when it comes to these things. That's what we've seen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and look, another big reason for people to move is religious reasons. They believe that, the sacrifice, if that's what's involved, is worth it. Which is obviously where I would disagree with them. Deborah says, leaving Gush Katif was moronic. Many people knew that at the time, and resettling Gush Katif is very popular, except with the collectivist leftists. And Deborah then says, when Sharon was elected, he promised he wouldn't leave Gush Katif, but he was blackmailed by the left to leave it up in a referendum and made his threats. You're giving Sharon credit that he doesn't deserve. So first of all, he ran. This was the main issue in the election when he was elected. I believe this was re-elected. I believe this was 2003. His whole point was that this is a disaster. And I remember my first time I went to a political protest, not with adult supervision and encouragement, was a protest against against basically removing the settlements. And Sharon was the main speaker in that. And the second time I went to such a protest, they had the video from him from the first time because it was a protest against him. So no, Sharon made a promise that he was elected on, which is Israel will not forcefully remove its citizens from Gaza. And then he said, okay, we're going to have a referendum. And then he decided a referendum of Likud party members. And then he lost, and then he did it anyway. So no, Sharon is very much the villain in this, and he cannot blame people. Look, there are pressures when you're prime minister. If you can't stand it, don't run or resign. But don't do disastrous things and then say, well, I had no choice. The left pressured me. That's completely unacceptable. Best monster with the best joke of the night. Has Ehud Barak ever expressed regret for the 2000 Southern Lebanon withdrawal? No, Ehud Barak is, I think this was also, yeah. I'll let Deborah speak on this. Deborah says, now Barak is delusional and thinks if he can stir up enough trouble so that Jews are killing each other, he can retake control without being elected. I don't know about all of that, but he certainly is stirring up trouble on purpose. He said that he supports civil disobedience at this time because the reason for the civil disobedience was because Israel isn't fully capitulating to Hamas to bring back the hostages. This was his reason. No, I haven't heard El Barak say anything since Israel basically undid the progress that Hezbollah has made thanks to El Barak. So no, I'm surprised that this guy even opens his mouth anymore, but it shows how short the memory is of, unfortunately, of people everywhere, including in Israel.
Just quickly, someone in the chat says, do we really want all those Muslims brainwashed by generations by this point? So, the thing is that better people can show up. And this, I don't think it would, like, if we take the number 2 million, I don't think you can realistically like get rid of 2 million people just like that. Uh, that wasn't done even with the Israeli War of Independence. Some people who actively fought against Israel, and many people, even Arabs, were basically, forced away from the area. That's what happens in a war. But again, I think you're sort of, when you just say, they just need to get out, you are sort of avoiding what actually needs to be done. Even if there were no Arabs in Gaza, it wouldn't magically solve Israel's issues. Israel needs to realize that it has enemies like all around it, and it realistically cannot it cannot be the goal just like kill every single one of them. You have to look at who is actually sourcing this, and who has been fueling this for decades now, and it's Iran. And that's one nation that, if something was finally done about Iran, at this point, almost everything in Middle East is connected to Iran. Once you get rid of them, even though, you won't have nations in the region completely now aligning themselves with Israel, there will be much less, active threat against Israel.
Yeah, so Alex says there aren't 2 million. I completely agree with that. She says the numbers in the West Bank and Gaza are inflated by 30% according to the Gavim NGO. I think even that might be generous, but again, we don't know. Like, if you don't actually have any any sort of way to you know have a census of the population, you don't know. And so we don't know. What we get is whatever Hamas thinks will work for them, if those are the numbers we believe. But yes, in any case, even if it's 200,000, it's difficult to move them elsewhere. And the suggestion, I think a couple of people suggested Egypt. That would be kind of the easiest, but also pretty risky. I would think maybe in a future,
Yeah, everyone is
peace
talking
deal with
like
Iran.
any other nation wants to accept Palestinians. No one wants them. Everybody, like, PLO was kicked out of Lebanon because of the shit they've been doing there, as well as it was kicked out of Jordan. No one
Yeah,
wants them because they've been so radicalized that
yeah, and
even Muslims are not safe against the Palestinians.
yeah, but I would think whatever future regime there is in Iran might kind of be encouraged to say, look, you caused this problem, now you deal with it, and that there could be they could have their own territory where they live, and I don't know what exactly they would do, controlled by the Iranian regime, of course. But this is off the top of my head. Look, in terms of it's not easy, I agree with you, but this is a country, we're talking about a country that thought, okay, how do we get to a point where all the big commanders in Hezbollah have pagers because they're too afraid to use cell phones, and we explode them all. And they did it. So yeah, I think it would require some creative thinking, but I do think it's a necessary thing for Israel to do. So they
You
should
you mean
find a
taking
way.
out Iran, or what are you specifically talking about?
I mean, deporting much of the population in Gaza.
Well, I think it's pretty easy to do. I think what real Israel is worried about is like international outrage would be insane.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
yeah. Um, as it always is, Israel, if you don't want to anger the world, lay down and die. That's the option available for Israel. Otherwise, how about dealing with the enemies, regardless of what the enemy's friends want Israel to do? Anyway, this is a topic that will, I'm sure, come up some more. And yeah, I'm sure it'll come up some more in Al Jazeera as well. If Cenk says it, Al Jazeera probably also says it. Although, as we'll cover in the reality show, often what Al Jazeera says is controlled not by the Cenk Uyghurs of the world, but by the Hamases of the world, specifically Hamas. Yeah, that is the topic of today's episode of the reality show. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes on the reality show.
Am I?